GoFundMe campaign to help pay for the border wall is seeing really some incredible numbers today. More than $5 million has been raised for this effort, and it was started by a triple amputee veteran who is also a U of A graduate. The initial goal was $200 million. That goal now is $1 billion, and that is actually GoFundMe's maximum fundraising limit. More than 80,000 people have already contributed.
From Capitol Hill, where the U.S. House just approved $5.7 billion for President Trump's border wall. This is not a done deal yet. The bill has to go back to the Senate for consideration, so still no official way to avert the government shutdown. Meanwhile, a Colorado man has started a campaign to crowdfund the border wall if the Trump administration can't get it done. He's already raised millions of dollars. So how legit is this campaign? And can you even really pay for the border wall this way? Team 12's William Pitts is verifying it for us tonight.
Who's going to pay for the wall? Who?
Or maybe you, like directly with your own cash. That's the plan from a veteran who's tired of waiting for the border wall, and he started a GoFundMe.
Here's the idea behind the GoFundMe. If Congress won't pay for the border wall, maybe we should.
The GoFundMe is asking for donations, and they've gotten more than $7 million in 3 days at last check. The campaign was set up by a guy named Brian Kolfage, a triple amputee who served in the Air Force. He says he's appeared on Fox News and talks about protecting the country from illegals.
So can they actually pay for a border wall?
$7 million in 3 days is impressive, but the president wanted $5 billion for the wall. So they've raised a little more than 0.1% of the wall. And the GoFundMe goal is only $1 billion, not the whole cost of the wall. According to the U.S. Treasury, you can donate money to the feds. So yes, they could pay for the wall. But at this rate, it would take years. And according to the website, they'd need 63 million people, the number of people who voted for Trump, to donate $80 each. So is this whole thing just a scam? Not surprisingly, the GoFundMe campaign says no. Kolfage claims to be working on legal forms to make sure the money goes to the wall, but doesn't have it yet. And if they don't make the $1 billion goal, or at least come close, Kolfage says he'll refund all the money. But there's nothing in the campaign or with GoFundMe that guarantees that. So is this campaign legit? We can verify it's as legit as any other GoFundMe campaign. Some people have already donated huge amounts, like $50,000, $10,000. But there's still a long way to go to get to $1 billion. William Pitts, 12 News.
Okay, so how should the border wall be funded? Should the money come from U.S. taxpayers? Should it come from Mexico? A GoFundMe? As we mentioned a little earlier, an online fundraiser is trending tonight right now to help pay for a border wall.
More than $9 million, and as a matter of fact, over $10 million now has been raised through a GoFundMe page set up by a veteran. We asked you to vote on whether you donate to help build the wall.
So here are the results. You can see them at the bottom of your screen right now. About 43% of you have said yes, you would contribute, but a majority, 57%, say no way, not going to help contribute to that wall. Thank you for voting.
So apparently we can't scarf up $5 billion to help keep our borders from being overrun. But it turns out the State Department just announced we're handing over nearly $11 billion to Mexico and Central America to help keep people from migrating here illegally. Now, I have just one question. Are you freaking kidding me? Hey guys, welcome back to MRC TV's Reality Check. I'm Brittany Hughes. Now, while coming up with $5 billion out of a $3 trillion budget to put toward a border wall and secure our own country is apparently too much to ask, the federal government did just manage to scrounge up a whopping $10.6 billion, most of it via American taxpayer dollars, of course, to fork over to Central America and Mexico in foreign aid and investment, all to try to keep people from coming here. The AP reported Tuesday that the U.S. government has pledged $5.8 billion in aid for government and economic development in Central America and another $4.8 billion in development aid for southern Mexico. The money is made up of both public and private dollars, but most of it is coming from your pocket. And by the way, this is on top of the nearly $600 million that we've already sent these countries since 2001. The ongoing plan, although it's never worked before, is to try to strengthen job opportunities and economies in Latin American countries like Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador so that their people won't have to migrate illegally to the United States. In other words, American taxpayers are now on the financial hook to pay people to not come here illegally. Of course, the recently elected Mexican president was all too happy about this plan, saying, quote, "I have a dream that I want to see become a reality, that nobody will want to go work in the United States." Thanks to our wallets, of course. Oh, and it gets better. The U.S. has also apparently expressed interest in Obrador's proposal to invest in Mexican agriculture, forestry, and tourism projects, likely signaling even more taxpayer dollar checks to be written in the future. But when it comes to Mexico's part, the AP reports, quote, "It was unclear if Mexico would give anything in return." Of course, that's not stopping them from asking for our money, though. In fact, the AP reports that the Mexican Foreign Relations Secretary says they need even more U.S. investment for Central America's Alliance for Prosperity program. He figures about $25 billion should do it. Now, the same week that the State Department announced the billions in funding going to Central America, Democrats again shut down Trump's proposed $5 billion toward a border wall to help stop illegal immigration here, complaining that it was a waste of taxpayer money. So now let's just get this straight. Not only do we have to pay to process illegal aliens who come across the border, put their families on welfare, pay for their health care and their kids' education, pay to send them home, and pay to jail their criminals, now we have to pay them to not come here in the first place. Also, just to remind everyone, there are about 2.5 million American children who are currently homeless in the United States. There are also about 40,000 homeless veterans on the street any given night. Nearly 39 million Americans are on food stamps. About 200 people die of drug overdoses every day, thanks to our out-of-control opioid crisis. We're $21 trillion in debt and climbing, and our infrastructure is falling apart. But apparently, we can find nearly $11 billion of our hard-earned money to help people in Central America get jobs because their own crap-hole governments can't be bothered. So please, tell me again how we can't come up with $5 billion for a wall. And that's your reality check.
Or do you think that the wall shouldn't be funded? You can take part in our live interactive poll right now by heading to 12news.com/yourvoice to vote.
A war veteran is trying to do something Congress will likely never agree upon: securing money for a border wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Brian Kolfage lost both his legs and most of one arm while serving in Iraq. He was awarded the Purple Heart. Now, he started a GoFundMe over the weekend saying if 63 million people who voted for Trump donated just $80, they would have enough for the wall. He says he's working with lawyers and lawmakers to make sure the money raised will go towards the wall.
And as of this afternoon, that GoFundMe has raised $7.5 million. Its goal is to raise $1 billion.
10 News now getting exclusive access to the shelter helping dozens of migrants after being released from ICE custody awaiting their asylum court date.
Our 10 News reporter Laura Acevedo is joining us. And Laura, you were the only one allowed inside this San Diego Rapid Response Network.
Yeah, and this is a story that we have been working on for months. We can't say exactly where the shelter is because volunteers want to protect the migrants. Today they were 59 people inside of that shelter, many of them children, all of the adults wearing ankle monitors. Volunteers tell me they are overwhelmed and haven't even started helping the migrants from the most recent caravan.
Delmi Romero. It's the 8th day at the Rapid Response Network shelter for Delmi Romero and her 4-year-old son, Oliver. She says she heard about the caravan and decided it was her opportunity to leave Honduras, traveling for a month and a half. Romero tells me she left to keep Oliver from seeing violence and crime in her neighborhood, spending 4 days in federal custody, then released with an ankle monitor and an asylum court date. And that's where the shelter comes in.
This is a place where they're safe, where they can have a meal, where their children can play and not be afraid that they're not going to see mom and dad again. Rapid Response usually houses people 24 to 48 hours. When someone shows up, they first meet with a doctor, then to an intake room where volunteers make travel arrangements with family already in the country.
But Romero has no family in the U.S., so volunteers are still looking for a plan to help her. This is one of 3 sleeping quarters in the shelter. This one has 67 beds where the migrants get to stay as a family. But the shelter says they're running out of resources to continue helping.
And we've made this loud and clear to local government that if this does increase tomorrow, we don't have the capacity, the resources to take this on.
The shelter can house 50 to 100 a night. The migrants are fed 3 times a day. They're each given a full set of clothing, and sometimes the network funds their travel plans. Romero is holding on to her faith, saying she trusts God will continue to help her in her journey.
Now, the city tells me they are looking at all options to help the Rapid Response Network, but the shelter says they'd like those talks to turn into action.
We're hearing more and more of these personal stories, and a lot of them are mothers with small children trying to escape the violence in Honduras.
Right, and for Romero, she's not sure where she's going to go.
Wow, it's a really interesting look. Thank you, Laura.
Check America.
Congressman Jim Jordan is a Republican representing Ohio, right in the middle of all this, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on. So the obvious question as we have the final debate over the wall during the final hours of the Republican Congress.
Yeah.
Why now? Why 2 years later?
Well, you're right. We should have done it earlier. We should have done it in March on the big spending bill. We told American people we would. Then we said, no, we're going to do it in September. Didn't do it then on that spending bill. Then we said we'll do it on December 7th. No, we didn't do it then. And then we said we'll do it on December 21st. We did it tonight in the House. I mean, just a few minutes ago it passed. Even though last week in the Oval Office, Nancy Pelosi said the House can't get the votes to pass a border security wall, funding for a border security wall. We just did a few minutes ago, got 217 votes. I think the Democrats had 185. So we just passed it in the House. That's step one, and now it goes back to the Senate, and we'll see what happens from there. But we need to stand firm on this because, as you said, as the president said, this is a central promise we made the voters in 2016. This is our last best chance to do what everyone knows is just good common sense. Everyone but Democrats, I should say, knows is good common sense.
But I think it's fair for the rest of us to press a little deeper and ask, well, why didn't it happen? I mean, you're absolutely right. It should have happened. You probably would have preferred it had happened earlier. But
we pushed for it to happen earlier, yes.
Right. I remember. But it didn't, and that means that people prevented it from happening. Obviously, Speaker Ryan was one of them. Who else? Just so the rest of us can keep score.
Well, look, it's always easier. I mean, to do something that really counts and has lasting value, lasting meaning, it's never easy. So one
it's
good
hard,
thing,
for sure.
Well, exactly. So anything worth doing is always difficult, but Congress always has a way of trying to take the least resistant route and do the easy thing. So that's why it happened, I think, most often.
Well, wait, but hold on. I mean, look, and I know you were for it, but the tax bill was definitely hard. There was a lot of opposition to it. And the leadership just decided we're getting this done.
Yes.
It's not something that Trump ran on or there was broad public support for, but they wanted it and they got it done. And they worked really hard, came on the show, made the case for it. They didn't do that with the wall. And why? Again, I think it's fair to know, since you're on the inside and we're not, who prevented that?
Well, I don't know anyone prevented it, but I think the intensity was more for the tax cuts than it was for repealing and replacing Obamacare and building the border security wall. I think you're right about that. But there's some intensity today. We've been pushing. And like I said, we just passed a bill that puts $5 billion for a border security wall. And that is a good first step.
Amen to that. Congressman, thanks very much for coming on for that update.
You bet, Tucker.
We do have more breaking news on this Thursday. Moments ago, the House of Representatives passed that bill giving President Trump more than $5 billion for his border wall. Earlier, Mr. Trump told Republican leaders he would not sign the Senate spending bill unless they had the funds for the wall. The measure now goes back to the Senate, where experts say has no chance of passing. If all sides cannot reach a deal, a partial shutdown of the federal government begins tomorrow night.
But before going any further, I want to address a matter of vital national importance. You've all been seeing it, reading it, hearing it, border security. Every nation has not only the right, but the absolute duty to protect its borders and its citizens. A nation without borders is a nation not at all. Without borders, we have the reign of chaos, crime, cartels, and believe it or not, coyotes. I will not surrender this nation to the whims of criminal organizations who prey on the vulnerable, who hurt women and children, and who spread human misery and suffering. Human trafficking and massive drug inflow must also be stopped. It's at a tremendous level. What we're doing and the incredible job being done by border security, ICE, Border Patrol, local police, and the military. The military has been incredible. And we're stopping them. It's a process you wouldn't believe how tough. But we're stopping them in record numbers. At this moment, there is a debate over funding border security and the wall, also called, so that I give them a little bit of an out, steel slats. We don't use the word wall necessarily, but it has to be something special to do the job. Steel slats. I've made my position very clear. Any measure that funds the government must include border security. Has to. Not for political purposes, but for our country, for the safety of our community. This is not merely my campaign promise. This is the promise every lawmaker made. It is the solemn promise to protect and defend the United States of America, and it is our sacred obligation. We have no choice. For decades, Washington abandoned this commitment and allowed millions and millions of people to enter our country illegally and over the objections of the American people. No one voiced or voted for a policy. No one endorsed this policy, and no one ratified this policy. It was a total assault on our democracy itself. Illegal immigration costs our nation $275 billion a year. You hear many different numbers. You can say billions and billions, but the number that I hear most accurate is $275 billion a year at least, millions of jobs and thousands of innocent lives. More than 90% of heroin comes across our southern border. Heroin deaths have tripled since 2002. Every week, this illegal heroin kills at least 300 Americans and costs our nation over $230 billion to $289 billion. Or nearly $5 billion a week. I spoke with President Xi of China, and he has agreed to make fentanyl another one of the big, big problems. And probably, I think it's just gone to number one, kills 80,000 people a year in our country. He's going to make that a major crime in China. And if you get caught, you pay a major penalty. It's called the death penalty. And it wasn't listed as a crime until I spoke to him. So I appreciate President Xi for doing that. That's going to have a tremendous impact. Every day, 10 known or suspected terrorists try to gain entry into our country. Every day, 2,000 illegal aliens try to cross our borders. They try. We get most of them. It's hard without a wall. Every year, 50,000 illegal children are smuggled by coyotes and criminals into our country. In the last 2 years alone, ICE officers arrested criminal aliens charged with or convicted of 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, and 4,000 murders. It's rough stuff. Yet the Democrats continue to oppose border security no matter how many innocent people get hurt or die. Ridiculously and dangerously, certain people want open borders, which allow potentially massive crime. Our nation has spent trillions of dollars and sacrificed thousands of brave young lives defending the borders of foreign nations. I am asking Congress to defend the border of our nation for a tiny fraction of the cost. Essential to border security is a powerful physical barrier. Walls work, whether we like it or not. They work better than anything. In Israel, 99.9% successful. Think of it. I spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister, 2 days ago. We were talking about it. He said it's 99.9. I mean, he came up. I didn't ask. He said 99.9% successful. We have proposed a steel slat barrier to halt the deadly flow of these illegal traffickers, smugglers, and terrorists. Every day that we deprive our Border Patrol and ICE officers the resources they need, we put many innocent lives in harm's way. It should be bipartisan. I think it will end up being bipartisan. I really do. Illegal immigration also strains public services that Americans depend on, and illegal immigration drives down wages for the neediest Americans. No one who calls themselves a progressive should support illegal immigration. Open borders hurts poor Americans more than anyone else in our society. In life, there are certain principles worth fighting for, principles that are more important than politics, party, or personal convenience. The safety and security and sovereignty of the United States is the most important principle of all. If we don't stand strong for our national borders, then we cease to be a nation, and we betray our commitment to the loyal citizens of our great country. I look forward to signing a bill that fulfills our fundamental duty to the American people. It is all about, and I say this in any way they want to hear it, it's all about America first. We have to put our country first. We have to put our people first. And we have to put safety first. So thank you all very much. And we'll be working on that, Mitch and Paul and Kevin and everybody, and we'll see what we can do. But hopefully that'll all come together.
Data from the Department of Homeland Security is contradicting Democrats' claims that no terrorists are sneaking across the southern border. One America's Pearson Sharp has all the details.
Separating the U.S. from Mexico is a border that runs for nearly 2,000 miles. However, barely a quarter of that is actually protected by a wall. Just 580 miles of the border is secured with a physical barrier. And much of that is nothing more than a small chain-link fence. That leaves almost 1,500 miles of America's southern border wide open for literally anyone to come across. And without protection, that's exactly what happens. According to the U.S. Border Patrol, hundreds of thousands of unauthorized migrants are captured at the border every single year. And that's to say nothing of the tens of thousands of illegal cargo entries they bring with them, including drugs and deadly weapons. Yet politicians like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi put their opinions above these facts, refusing to recognize the potential threat these unauthorized migrants pose to American citizens. They go on to claim there's no evidence to suggest that these migrants mean us any harm, and state, for the record, there are no terrorists coming across U.S. borders. But again, facts completely contradict their opinions. According to the Department of Homeland Security, from 2006 to 2015, a 9-year period, over 67,000 migrants from countries considered state sponsors of terrorism were apprehended at the southern border. These are migrants from Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, India, Sudan, Egypt, and Pakistan, all captured trying to illegally cross into the United States. Since 2001, at least 15 members of terrorist groups, from al-Shabaab to al-Qaeda to the Islamic State, have all been stopped trying to illegally enter into the U.S. In 2015 alone, the Border Patrol arrested 4,000 people from countries classified as state sponsors of terrorism. Last year, in 2017, 3,800 known or suspected terrorists were arrested at the border. Not only that, but agents captured another 18,000 known criminals as well as 1,000 gang members. Drug dealers are captured too. On December 11th, $7 million worth of methamphetamines were seized at the southern border in Texas. Without our border protection, those are drugs that would now be in American communities. And these are just the cases we know about. Agents admit thousands of aliens managed to sneak through without being caught. Worse, once they're in, there's no way of knowing who they are or what they're doing here. In fact, one human smuggler who was detained even admitted that he knew he was helping to smuggle Islamic jihadists into America. One case involved a man from Somalia who was illegally smuggled into California, arrested, skipped his bond, and snuck into Canada, where he went on to stab a police officer and run down pedestrians in 2017. When President Trump famously said they aren't sending their best, he wasn't kidding. Yet many news outlets continue to insist there's no evidence that anyone from the Middle East is coming through the southern border. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, there are 86.4 million immigrants and immigrant-born children in the United States. That's nearly a quarter of the entire U.S. population. Not only that, but between 25 and 37 million of those are here illegally, meaning 1/3 of all the immigrants in America are illegal aliens. Worse still, the Census Bureau also found that a shocking 63% of all those immigrants receive welfare. Despite Democrats' claim that immigrants make America stronger and contribute to their communities, there's over 54 million people who come to the United States just to end up on welfare. And after 10 years, that number rises to more than 70%, which shows that once migrants get onto welfare, they don't get off. Ultimately, we have ample proof that terrorists, drug dealers, rapists, and gang members are trying to break into the United States, but our politicians still refuse to act. Nancy Pelosi says there is no problem and that no one dangerous is coming to America. But where is she getting her facts? Where are her numbers coming from? Because the very people who would know, the Border Patrol agents actually at the border, the men and women who risk their lives, who aren't safe back in Washington, and who see the people who are illegally coming across the border every day, say the situation there is terrible. And they warn that with the lack of current border security and the inability to stop them from coming across, these aliens do pose a serious and ongoing threat to America's safety. Pearson Sharp, One America News.
A GoFundMe page has raised now more than $5 million to fund the border wall. They're at 5.1 right now as Congress continues to block the president from delivering on his promise to the American people. One America's Jeremy Hartley tells us more on this fundraising effort.
He calls himself a veteran who is deeply invested in this nation. 37-year-old Brian Kolfage, a Purple Heart Iraq War veteran, started a GoFundMe page Sunday with the hopes of raising money for a border wall. Kolfage, who had 3 limbs amputated after a rocket attack in Iraq in 2014, pointed out on the funding site the promise to build a wall was one of President Trump's key campaign promises. It's a promise he said still needs to be fulfilled, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. Kolfage notes the government has accepted large private donations for building projects in the past, citing a $7.5 million donation to fund repairs to the Washington Monument in 2012. This, he says, is no different. Kolfage says he wants to ensure future generations have everything Americans enjoy today, calling on citizens to uphold the law, pitch in, and get the project rolling. He says if the 63 million people who voted for Trump in 2016 each donated $80, it would fund the entire wall. The page was initially started with a goal of $200 million, but the goal was raised to $1 billion after the overwhelming support and influx of donations. Kolfage calls on donors to hold him accountable that the donations are not a scam, providing his verified Facebook page as a way of contacting him. He goes on to say he is working on securing a point of contact within the Trump administration and working with a law firm to ensure the government will be bound to use the funds on a wall and not on anything else. He goes on to ensure if the $1 billion goal isn't reached, every penny will be refunded. The funding came a few days before White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders announced the Trump administration is seeking different forms of funding toward building the border wall. A budget proposal was passed by the Senate late Wednesday, but does not include $5 billion in funding sought by the president toward the wall. Border security funding, however, will reportedly be kept at current levels. Jeremy Hartley, One America News.
Get closer and closer to a government shutdown. President Trump is resolute. Today he announced that border security is a principle worth fighting for. Take a look.
Our nation has spent trillions of dollars and sacrificed thousands of brave young lives defending the borders of foreign nations. I am asking Congress to defend the border of our nation for a tiny fraction of the cost. In life, there are certain principles worth fighting for, principles that are more important than politics, party, or personal convenience. The safety and security and sovereignty of the United States is the most important principle of all. If we don't stand strong for our national borders, then we cease to be a nation, and we betray our commitment to the loyal citizens of our great country.
Now, with President Trump determined to fund the border wall, what will happen next in Congress? Joining us from Capitol Hill are 2 lawmakers who want wall funding. House Freedom Caucus members Georgia Congressman, Jody Hice, and from Virginia's 5th District, Tom Garrett. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. I'll go to Congressman Hice first. Congressman, I know the House Freedom Caucus has been doing an excellent job fighting for principles out there, and I admire your resolute stance on liberty, freedom, and immigration control and border wall funding. But what's going on with the establishment Republicans? Why are they fighting this? We've had the majority for a long time. From your perspective, what took so long to get this done?
Yeah, Dan, really, I don't have any idea as to why. Many of us have been calling for months and months and months. Let's deal with this issue. We have the majority. The American people sent us here for this. The president is behind it. Let's go for it. And for whatever reason, it's been stall after stall after stall, one CR after another. And at this point, there was just a line drawn in the sand, and it was like, we've had enough. We're no longer taking this. You know, it reminds me, Dan, down in the Alamo, there's a monument there, but the monument is not there because they won the fight. It's there because they fought. And that really, it was the line that was drawn in the sand with us over the last 24 hours. And it's turned out to just be an absolutely spectacular 24 hours, both for the Freedom Caucus, for our conference as a whole, for the president, and for our country.
You know, Congressman Garrett, the Republicans out there, the activists, the people knocking on the doors, donating the money, doing the actual work, that are sweating out there in the summer trying to get people in Congress on the Republican side elected, they've been disappointed before, repeatedly. Now, to the credit, the tax cut bill was excellent, but the Obamacare failure and other things, I see this as a political red line and one of those moments where we absolutely have to stand up for something. Do you feel the same way? Are you getting the same thing from your constituents?
You know, look, one of the reasons that you're lucky you didn't win when you ran for Congress is it's disgusting to be in a town where a bunch of people make promises that they don't intend to keep. And some of us, Congressman Heiss and myself, haven't equivocated. Let me be real clear. The cost in human lives, straight line cost of not protecting our border would equal the casualties in the Korean War over a decade. Over 10% of drunk drivers here illegally. That's thousands of deaths a year, 4,000 murders a year. If you then figure in illicit drugs that come into this country and kill our brothers and sisters and sons and daughters, and so this is truly about protecting America. I am for a robust and healthy immigration plan, but it is ridiculous and it flies in the face of a sovereign nation not to do this. It's tragic that it had to be done this way.
Yeah, I agree. Congressman Heiss, I'll just exit question with you here. You know, the GOP loses, Republicans lose when we don't advance our principles. I said this last night. Ironically, the Democrats lose when they advance theirs, right? Barack Obama did everything to decimate the Democrat Party and help Barack Obama. What do you think is going to happen on the Senate side? I understand we probably don't have the votes to overcome a filibuster, but are there enough moderate Democrats on the Senate side to get this pushed through? It's a reasonable bill.
Well, yeah, it is a reasonable bill, and it's a great question. And the truth of the matter, look, we've already seen the Schumer shutdown a few weeks ago. We are about to see the Schumer Senate shut down again because we're sending them a reasonable bill that defends our borders, protects American citizens. I mean, who would not be in favor of that? And $5 billion, when you compare that to $1.3 trillion that we have in our annual budget, I mean, we're talking like a day and a half of our budget to build this wall for security. And the truth of the matter is the Senate did not vote on this bill that they sent us. They passed it by voice vote. So we don't know where the Senate is going to be on this. But the reality is now that they're either going to fund this or they're going to shut down the government. And I just don't. That's a tough choice for them to be in right now.
This $5.7 billion, Dan, is actually less than one day. It's about a half a day.
Right.
And I'm tired of fixing the blame. Let's start fixing the problem. We in the House should do our jobs, and if the clowns on the other side of the building want to fail, let them. But when we say, well, it won't get through the Senate, so we're going to abdicate our responsibility, I just won't accept that.
Yeah, Congressman Garrett, I like your style. I like you too, Congressman Heiss. You're a good man. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks for fighting a good fight, guys.
Border Patrol agents say what is in the back of these pickup trucks is the next step in securing the border, and it just reached San Diego. 10 News reporter Mackenzie Maynard went to Otay Mountain with CBP today to see how they work.
San Diego is the second place in the nation to have trucks like these. Border Patrol says they'll be rolling them out in just a couple days.
The looming threat of the migrant caravan still in Tijuana and more people potentially on the way. We need to make sure we're prepared for that as well.
The need is there, according to Border Patrol agents.
We're seeing more people coming this year.
But it's not the need for additional resources that brought these 5 mobile video surveillance systems to San Diego. It's their massive increase in arrests since last year.
Nearly a 90% increase compared to last fiscal year is significant. That's going to get attention. That's going to get resources, that's going to get manpower, infrastructure, technology.
And that's just what they got. With each of the 5 trucks, the agents will be able to see 2 camera displays at all times, the daytime camera and the infrared camera. The mast will be able to be raised up 30 feet, giving agents a clear view they wouldn't otherwise be able to see.
If an individual or group of people is trying to come north or sneak across the international boundary down here just below this ridgeline, I can't physically see it with my own eyes right now.
Now, instead of using agents to search the grounds, they'll be able to rely on the 2 cameras to do that searching for them.
That prevents that agent from having to go down on foot, risk injury to themselves, and check that sensor physically. That could save hours per agent per shift.
The technology in these trucks also beats the technology in the infrared posts at the border. These posts have blind spots. These trucks don't. Border Patrol says these will not replace the border wall, but instead go hand in hand with it. Mackenzie Maynard, 10 News.
Right now, there are 11 trucks between San Diego and the Rio Grande Valley sector in Texas. Border Patrol says they're adding 3 more mobile video surveillance systems, and those will be stationed in Texas.
Central American migrants who arrived in Tijuana in November are now entering the U.S. legally. A woman and her son were some of the first to come across the border on asylum grounds. Our 10 News reporter Matt Boone is in San Ysidro with their story tonight. Matt.
Yes, Steve, we know of at least 12 people who have come across so far on asylum grounds. That's including this woman and her son who made it across last week. They were part of that caravan that arrived in Tijuana in November. They say it was a 4-month journey after they left their home in Honduras.
The trip was very difficult. I honestly tell you, I suffered a lot.
Maria Luisa Casares says the problems in Honduras started about 10 years ago. As the gang violence escalated, her father passed away. Then her husband left her when she had her son Javier, who has Down syndrome.
He never accepted my son because of his condition, so he abandoned all of our kids.
She said they were forced to pay a tax to the gangs or be killed.
The gangs don't have any heart. They kill whatever kids they come across.
She says she arrived in Tijuana with Javier and her other adult son in November. They slept in various shelters, including the large one at a sports complex where they got sick.
I had a really bad cough. I was vomiting blood, but I was more interested in my children's health than my own.
But at one of the shelters, she was finally approached by the Minority Humanitarian Foundation, who helped her and Javier get to the front of the line to approach the U.S. border.
I was really happy, but I was very surprised they left my other son.
She now wears an ankle GPS tracker as she awaits her asylum hearing, a process that could take 2 to 3 years.
I pray that I become legalized in this country and get asylum because I don't want to return to my country.
So whether or not she actually receives asylum is yet to be seen as that case proceeds. We reached out to the Border Patrol to see how many of those Central American migrants in the caravan have actually been let through on asylum grounds. They didn't give us an answer to that, only saying that here in the San Diego area for this past year, 12,000 people have approached the border claiming a credible fear. How many of those have actually made it across legally, they did not say. Reporting live at San Ysidro tonight, Matt Boone.
Also new tonight, a San Antonio church is remembering this 7-year-old girl who died in the custody of U.S. Border Patrol. The San Antonio Mennonite Church hosted this vigil to memorialize Jacqueline Carl Makin. The 7-year-old and her father traveled to the U.S. border with a large group of migrants, and they turned themselves over to authorities in New Mexico earlier this month. And 8 hours after being taken into custody, Jacqueline started having seizures. She was airlifted to an El Paso hotel, and a hospital that is, and later died. The advocates who gathered in San Antonio tonight want justice in her death and better treatment for minors in U.S. custody.
So we wanted to have a sign and a showing of solidarity here tonight to say to her family that we mourn with them, and we hope that the country would do better.
An autopsy is scheduled to determine the cause of her death.
And that leads us right into our digital dive right now. In the wake of this new spending bill, what becomes of the border wall? Well, an Air Force veteran launched a GoFundMe page to raise $1 billion for the border wall. And social media, as you can imagine, all abuzz about this. People are donating. In just 3 days, that page raised about $2.5 million. It's a lot of money, far short of the billion, but still a lot of cash. People are talking about it. Dan says, don't worry, Donald will take good care of everyone's donations. He's an honest, moral person. I think he's referring to the Trump Foundation troubles there. Let's see, what else do we have? David said people have donated over $2 million to a GoFundMe border wall. On an unrelated note, there were 120,000 homeless veterans in the U.S. So David thinks that we should be putting that money somewhere else. Patty likes it. She says this is 100% legit. Brian Colfage is a triple amputee Air Force veteran who lost both legs and his right hand while serving Iraq. He is raising this money to build the wall. She's sharing a link with the people who follow her on social media. Controversial issue when you're talking about the wall. We want to know what you think about it. Use the hashtag Sunrisers or comment on our Facebook page.
Yeah, a lot of money initially funded on this. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep up that kind of pace because, like you say, he wants $1 billion. That would have to be the largest GoFundMe ever, don't you think?
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily it would have to. We'll have to get the stats on that. But $1 billion, that's a lot of money.
It sure is.
Also,
border security. Whatever it takes to get border security, I will do it. I pledged that a long time ago, and I will pledge it always.
ICE has just released brand new numbers and statistics on the arrests of illegals in the United States.
That's right. This includes a 10% increase in administrative arrests of illegal aliens.
We've seen a 10% increase in both arrests and removals.
The executive order lays out the administration's plan to construct a physical wall along the shared border with Mexico, add 5,000 Border Patrol agents to the 17,000 already policing it, and build detention facilities to jail those who illegally cross it.
The day is over when they can stay in our country and wreak havoc.
Mr. Trump has blamed the estimated 11 million illegal immigrants already in the U.S. for taking jobs from American workers and driving up crime rates.
First and foremost, we're looking for illegal aliens who have also committed crimes in our country or another country, and to make sure that we remove them to protect our communities.
What about the amount of drugs? Homeland Security investigators, they seized nearly 900,000 pounds of narcotics so far this year, and we still have 2 more weeks to go.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
The president is committed to protecting every single American citizen. He knows that without border security and without borders, you have no country at all. And he's calling on Democrats to step up and actually do their jobs.
It's about safe communities. It's about wages, living conditions, quality of life. This is the battle right now, right before our very eyes. We are going to win because Donald Trump is not backing down.
I think the president is being a leader on this. He is drawing a line, and he is saying we're either going to have security or we're not. It's our sovereign responsibility to do so. He takes it very seriously. He's asking Congress to do their job.
We have new numbers from the border tonight which show just how many migrant children are in detention centers in the United States.
Many of them are filled with hundreds, in some cases even thousands of other children. Spencer Blake is here now with how many are here in our state.
So Heather, earlier in the year there were 1,600 kids in detention in Arizona. That number, though, has actually gone down to about half that now. And the reason for that decrease? Well, the state's largest provider of shelter, Southwest Key, was forced to shut down 2 facilities over improper background checks for employees. Several workers in charge of caring for those kids have been charged with sexually based crimes. Now, on the national level, though, there are more than 14,000 immigrant children in detention centers on residential facilities. In early 2017, to give you a comparison, the total number of migrant youth under the Office of Refuge Resettlement was less than 3,000. The Associated Press just released all of these new numbers in a report tonight.
And they've, in large part, been treated as prisoners, regimented in ways that are completely contrary to the way they've lived previously.
Experts say institutionalization of kids can lead to deep anxiety and even distrust of their own loved ones. This week, the government announced it will end part of the migrant screening processes. That should speed things up a little bit for kids who are waiting to get placed with family members who are here in the U.S. Now, those 14,000 minors have been put in 150 detention centers that are indeed funded by taxpayers. Jared, Heather.
A 7-year-old Guatemalan girl died last week while in Border Patrol custody.
There's growing outrage over the death of a 7-year-old Guatemalan girl in U.S. custody.
She died less than 24 hours later from dehydration and shock. Hillary Clinton tweeted, "What's happening at our border is a humanitarian crisis."
The Washington Post. Girl 7 dies in Border Patrol custody. USA Today. Migrant girl dies of dehydration in Border Patrol custody. MSNBC. Migrant girl dies in U.S. custody awaiting medical attention. You read any of these headlines and you basically think a 7-year-old girl was starved to death in American custody while authorities just sat there and watched. But that's not what happened. I'm Anders Hagstrom, and these are the facts. The girl's name was Jacqueline McKean, and she and her father were in Border Patrol custody for just 8 hours before she died of apparent dehydration, which would mean she hadn't had water for days beforehand. But did American authorities mishandle the situation or not provide her treatment? No. Jacqueline was in a group of 163 migrants who turned themselves in to claim asylum. They were put on a bus to a migrant facility 90 minutes away, and it was on that bus ride that she began to have seizures. Medics did everything they could on the bus, then she was airlifted to a hospital where doctors simply couldn't save her. This is not a story of a crass and evil Border Patrol as mainstream headlines are leading their readers to believe. In fact, MSNBC went so far as to basically lie and use Obama-era footage to make it seem like Trump's Border Patrol intentionally dehydrates migrants.
One of the issues was dehydration. We're going to show some video, which you probably can't see just the way that you guys are on a live view camera right now. But there's video of Border Patrol agents dumping water on the ground, water that was meant to be left for migrants. This is from the Tucson-based aid group, What do you know about whether water is being provided to migrants when they are picked up near the border?
Except this girl got food and water when she was detained, and her father said he had, quote, no complaints about how his daughter was treated. At the end of the day, this is a classic example of the media manipulating a tragic situation to fit their left-leaning immigration narrative. And now let's go to some of your comments on last week's video about creepy porn lawyer going after Tucker Carlson. Debbie Baker says, my goodness. Debbie Baker says, I prefer Tucker's version of events, far less chance of it being a blatant lie. This is actually true. So Creepy Porn Lawyer is saying that Tucker Carlson basically went and attacked this guy at a Virginia country club because basically Tucker is racist, is basically the argument, when Tucker says, actually, this guy insulted my daughter, called her a whore and a C-word, and obviously Tucker was mad. So who's lying? Well, the country club sided with Tucker and kicked the other guy out of the country club. Linda Plante says, glad he got wine thrown in his face. Good job. So this is actually a reference. Tucker Carlson's son threw wine in the face of the guy who supposedly called his sister a whore and a C word, which, I mean, it's like the bougiest way to get back at someone. Craig Hess says, if that was my daughter or granddaughter, this MF would be eating through a straw if he was lucky.
Now to the Trump presidency. Today, the U.S. announced that migrants seeking asylum through the southwest border will be held in Mexico until their claim can be processed. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary made that announcement during a House Judiciary Committee hearing. Asylum seekers from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador will now wait and be given a notice to appear for their immigration court hearing.
They will not be able to disappear into the United States. They will have to wait for approval to come into the United States. If they are granted asylum by a U.S. judge, they will be welcomed into America. If they are not, they will be removed to their home countries.
Mexico will continue to provide humanitarian aid to individuals waiting out their legal proceedings near the border. The new policy goes into effect immediately.